Equating to the same qualitative formalities I've stated before with the topic of Ridley being a perfect video game villain, the inclusion of his entire armada of the space pyrite race alone is also a redeemable icon for who they are and what they seek to attain for their notorious ambitions. More notably classified as ruffians always appearing in the midst of a certain missionary objective residing for them to intervene and engage with Samus while she's occupied adventuring or navigating through the vast regions toward the next destination she's aiming for. And when they do decide to pull off an ambush on Samus, well, let's just say that the battle's already ended for them. What interests me the most about the space pirates is the fact that they know damn well how formidable she is in multi-combat. Yet despite this, they're still incredibly persistent enough to hold their vow of destroying their sworn enemy, constantly impeding their goal, regardless if every attempt results in suicide. Of course, that doesn't necessarily mean they're deliberately foolish enough to throw their own lives straight at where they're about to instantly meet their fate. On a scientific point of things, they are very intelligent with their prowess of experimental biologic research and analysis on data, enough to where they begin to study how things work and improve their versatility at a significant rate after thoroughly conducting a large portion of research to be utilized efficiently. And the most prime examples that makes all of this intriguingly promising for what they've successfully attained in their dense collection of data saved for future obligations is renovating a metamorphic alteration of their leader to greatly enhance his defenses and technological abilities to a high degree of warning. That suffered a major excruciating flaw in design as they expense for calling it finished. Constructing layers of armor modeled after Samus's beam weapons with consistent durability, yet weak to the same element they're wearing for some reason. And there was at one point where they even attempted to replicate her morph ball ability for their golden opportunity of gaining the upper hand, believing they could potentially recreate everything they've witnessed through Samus's arsenal for themselves. But with rather mortifying results. Even with these obtusely major constraints the space pirates have built into their projects, their incredible sense of wisdom really shouldn't be taken for granted in terms of drastically increasing their threat level considerably. With or without flaws, they're still an elusive and cunningly evil race that knows how to utilize their analysis properly and ultimately reveal themselves as a major threat to the galaxy. Even though that all of their schemes always ends in miserable failure because they just can't compete with Chozo design weaponry no matter how hard they try. That was a time when fortune rained down from an enigma and discovered the element of Phazon, doubling down their research and experiments so tremendously that it gave way to a plan of high risk and high reward by honing it to the fullest extent of using this newly acquired unknown hazardous element to create abnormal versions of standard enemies and other subjects to make bioweapons, therefore increasing their formidability even further beyond normal. Upon reaching an insidious yet significant success rate with their contorted Phazon experiments, they've decided to look more farther beneath the surface of the sediments and come up with more bolder ideas. I have no regrets. Enter down into the ice dome of quarantine, and Thardis, pirate log entries formerly classified as Project Titan, shall reawaken. Another experiment from the space pirates as a result of them testing the properties of Phazon, this time infused into non-organic matter after receiving success from that of the inhabitants obtained from Talon 4. However, the effects from this idea turned out to be so catastrophic that the powers of Phazon infused into Thardis were deemed too powerful, and therefore became an ideal solution of having to completely dispose the project entirely due to an inability of controlling it. A project gone right yet with an unfavorable outcome as the end result. And this colossal sentient mass of solid material found in the dirt is quite formidably effective in combat, able to continuously generate ultra-frigid beams of ice that can render you frozen, hurl 3 rocks of Phazon summoned from the ground, and can curl itself into a ball in an attempt to crush you. Conceptuality-wise, on the other hand, is what makes Thardus truly stand out as a worthy opponent with great replay value. Scans detect massive quantitative levels of Phazon radiation emanating from its physical structure, which is enough to cause the lock-on feature entirely ineffective, therefore requiring the ability of thermal vision obtained back from the depth of the Space Pirate base in Phendrana Drifts. When the thermal visor is activated, weak points of highly concentrated levels of Phazon will be rendered visible on Thardus' left leg joint, enabling lock-on and now susceptible to attack. Once the weak spot sustains enough damage, the Phazon core will then be exposed, causing immense levels of radiation to overload the thermal visor, forcing to switch back to combat and continue the process as before until it breaks to move on to the next. After the third weak point on its right arm is removed, provocation is enabled as Thardus begins to accumulate solar-powered energy and encases the arena in a veil of light, affecting the combat visor. After when its right arm and both shoulder joints are dismantled, Thardus reverts the scenery back to normal upon realizing that it serves no valid purpose as a strategy whatsoever, thus leaving behind the very last weak point to be ruptured: the head. After that's done, Thardus will crumble and reinstate back to an ordinary, non-sentient, heaping pile of rocks. Albeit this fight can get a tad bit repetitive for having to constantly switch between visors throughout each sequence of Phazon telling thermal vision to get lost every time! But there's just something about the concept of slowly breaking apart an enormous rock beast to oblivion so damn satisfying. And of course, I can't forget about mentioning the music either. Vibes of mystery gifted from the delicate piano melody, while the intense keyboard, epic bass rhythms, the horn in the background, and the rest of the standard noises heard in Metroid Prime's sound font combined together manifest the ideal representation of rectifying the idea for going head-to-head with the Space Pirates' recent Phazon experiments. At first it comes out as a shocking twist for the stone behemoth emerging from the surface. Then the piano adds more elements of mystery to invoke the final conclusion that something unnatural is at work. The power of Phazon mutation. Sentient geological cataclysm. From cool design to genius concepts and awesome music makes Thardus a solid boss fight indeed. Sorry to bring the bad news, Igneous, but I have no one here to kick me out. I have a confession to make. Looking back in the past when the ballot of Super Smash Bros. 4 was announced, I was one of the many naysayers that didn't like the idea of Ridley being playable. As banal as it is to perceive on why, can be briefly summarized as the important factor of him not being able to fit. The same exact idea can be said about Dark Samus, because the purpose of adding yet another Samus in Metroid's lineup of characters to play as in Super Smash Bros. Is asinine, and would be an extremely awkward sight to witness. How naive I was back then. Now that Mr. I'm going to blow your fucking mind has proven my ass wrong about the odds of Ridley and Dark Samus not being possible as playable characters in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, I'm beginning to imagine that people on Amino are probably calling me out by this point, after the given statements I wrote down on my blog. Well, now it's safe to say that I am no longer a naysayer, and instead a proud Ridley main in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Menacing, fierce, merciless, evil, and so goddamn fun to use! I remember the time way back when me and my friends were blown off the edge of our seats when we first saw his reveal trailer like it was yesterday. And after seeing that humorous splash screen of Ridley hits the big time, it made me think to myself, it's not like I've already seen something like that happen before! Alright, hold the fuck up! I have several questions. You are telling me that this tenacious, destructive, life-ruining, cataclysmic Pterosaur hits the big time more than Smash Brothers by coming out of fucking nowhere and arrives to deliver the shocking grand entrance, appearing as the final boss for the first time in Metroid history? Is this not something classified as canon in Metroid's timeline? Does this change anything in Metroid 2 Return of Samus? Why is he built with early meta-cybernetics? What is he doing here? And who in the fuck saw this coming? Unless the answers might associate with this theme song playing during the announcement trailer of the game, I believe that it is safe to say that there were a lot of people who had every damn right to not expect this incredulous affinity of making an entrance simply because of the fact that Ridley was never in the original game, nor did AM2R! Or perhaps I'm just droning on over my refusal of disbelieving the unexpected. Regardless though, this entire moment subjectively speaks a lot more than what everyone normally thinks. Because originally, it's the Queen Metroid that's been the final boss in both entries of Metroid 2 Return of Samus. Binary concept of going all out on explosive artillery delivered straight to her face until it blows up. The first one being relatively straightforward that gets more dangerous for each missile you fire at her, while AM2R is the same idea, but made more threatening by going through a series of wall breaking that progressively gets more difficult in each sequence. But in Samus Returns, the Queen Metroid is made completely different than what she was before. She has you constantly push all the way back against a wall, demolishes nearly every trace of area to evade by slamming her head against the ground that covers more than half the room, setting the terrain on fire, and even fire out green orbs of bullet hell while the terrain is rendered off limits, all of which can deal a ludicrous total of a single energy tank for each hit received, making this fight even crazier, intense, and more deadly than ever. In my experiences, it was gladly more than enough to make me believe that this was indeed the final boss due to how many times I've died. Eventually, when I did terminate the Queen Metroid, things started to progress like normal by the standard implemented canonical and important event held accountable in Metroid's story campaign via a perplexing spectacle hatching from the shell born to soon write history in gaming. A helping hand opening the obstructed path leading to reach toward the end for a job well done. Until turmoil suddenly emerges from the amidst of the atmosphere, which is made in the form entirely of dark ambient rehash of criteria from Super Metroid, therefore invoking a forced whiplash vibe of "it's not over yet." Elements that had been slashed mercilessly through the stars even further as I now suddenly see myself outside upon being greeted by an extremely apprehensive setting in the form of a hell-bent raging storm in an ominous green-colored horizon. It almost felt like it was inviting me to something that I didn't want to be a part of, now that I finally understand that the Queen Metroid was only intended for delivering what is yet to come and arrive in utter dismay. Like I said before, who expected Ridley to appear in SR388? Because I sure as hell didn't! I guess if they wanted to make a game for reviving a dead series, might as well rectify the meaning of the title for Samus not being the only one to make a return. And by that I mean reiterating the obvious clarification yet again by emphasizing making an entrance. And what's the most definitive solution for Ridley to possibly achieve this than by lurking somewhere near the landing site, lying in wait, and strikes out just when the infant Metroid descends towards Samus's ship and gets captured by him, knowing damn well what it's good for, and optimizes the ideal prevention of Samus from ever attaining her future obligation of discovering what true power lies within that larval parasite. It's rendered unnoticed through the visor, but it is clearly seen from her ferocious actions that Samus is not happy with Ridley's detaining presence in the slightest extent. For a lack of better words to say about it, she is fucking pissed seeing him. She doesn't give a single fuck of what's being made through this sudden calamitous event born from a strike of lightning, because Proteus Ridley is anything but an ordinary encounter. Far from it. Despite his obscurely different and linear facial structure, the primary purple color scheme, cybernetic armor plating, devastating combat potential, theme song, and foreshadowing gesticulations is everything that needs to be brought to mind that it is still indeed Ridley. And by the goddamn deceits of World Dead and Below, this entire fight outclassifies the term epic way beyond anything that has ever happened in all of Metroid history. There is an unreal level of chaos forged into this final draw of Total Insurgents. This incredulous fight against Ridley arrives in the shape of a gigantic blade, sharpened at maximum capacity with contortion, slaughters the classification of ordinary to an irrevocable pile of a dismembered, blood-gushing corpse, flesh with sin and remorse, renovates it back to life, violently re-alters its classification written entirely out of the blood of its ego, and has, without fucking question, transmuted the ordinary encounter into a quintessential manifestation about a historic event of the main character and her sworn nemesis, justifying the odds, following no rule of authority, both sides doubling down their sworn desire of savage rebellion by unleashing all of their combined strength, going all out, transcending the new meaning of ordinary into a final battle between the main series protagonist and villain, fighting to the death in a literal gathering storm of mayhem. You see this? This is high-profile rejuvenation witnessed in its former glory. This is how you make a proper Metroid game that doesn't kill the franchise. This is what we've been asking for. And this is Ridley's biggest moment ever! Should I stop right there, or should I get to explaining the fight already? As is par for the course by now, the whole concept of Proteus Ridley is everything anyone could ever ask for in a Metroid game. But I have yet to unravel the perceivable factor on what truly makes it stand out as an objectively ideal representation of these qualities gifted from above, and therefore hold total dominion over what the rest of his previous forms didn't come nearly close to provide them completely. Starting off as an okay, you know the rest. With Ridley giving the infant Metroid an early kidnapping, making Samus intervene immediately upon witnessing her nemesis as an unexpected visitor, commencing the fight. Since Proteus Ridley now has the infant Metroid withheld in his grasp, this fight is built completely with him maintaining an airborne style of attacks, bearing a fair minimum consisting of multiple potent bursts of purple energy fired in an arc, standard tail thrusts, and slamming directly down to where you're standing. After Ridley receives a good decent amount of damage, he will then attempt to fly away with the infant Metroid and retrieve it to the space pirates and utilize as powerful sources of energy, causing Samus to run after him and grabs onto his tail to stall his escape. Ridley attempts to shake her off of his tail, allowing Samus for an astute counterstrike for his notion of insignificance by performing a sudden turbo boost, lands onto him and begins blasting rapid shots of plasma energy forcefully onto his chest, causing Ridley to loosen his grip on his hand from the immense trauma he's received, releasing the infant Metroid. Samus then quickly dives down to retrieve it and lands a direct shot of plasma onto Ridley's wing, sending him crashing against the cliffside and falls down to be buried in piles of rubble. Defeated. Hell no! May I need to remind you and further emphasize that he is the final boss for good reason? It should already be known to everyone by this point that Ridley doesn't go down that easily. Especially that this battle of endless outrage lasts for 3 whole phases. If this was Nintendo's true intention for delivering a worthy fight of Ridley to remember, then by the ascended accolade of Satoru Iwata's spirit, they have rectified it endearingly. Because if it's a more than an epic fight to the death you want, then you'd bet your very fucking soul to Satan himself that you're going to get it. Proteus Ridley Phase 2. The infant Metroid now watches the historical event being made as Ridley is more enraged than ever after experiencing a sudden impact of forced delivery bestowed from Samus's vindictive mortal fire wrought with opposing whiplash. In this phase, the option of mercy has been struck down into a state of rebellious calamity as Proteus Ridley now resides on the ground, striking relentlessly with his claws before firing an instant burst of energy. His tail thrusting attack now gains the ability to summon a wave of stone out of the ground. It briefly flies in place, taking up a large portion of the given area from his tail and instantly rams into the wall in an attempt to trap you into the attack. Wielding the same attacks as before previously, in addition to a more commonly used aerial slash if you approach him close enough. In comparison to the first phase, which is only brought out as a warm-up, the second phase, on the other hand, can be best represented as the birthing overgrowth of insanity, encasing around the nightmarishly ominous stationary twister placed in the background, sending out an overly destructive action that legitimately blew my mind and made one with the swirling debris adding to the chaos. Dealt with more damage received, Proteus Ridley gets angered with Samus's ambitious authority and charges after her while Samus defies all laws of physics and jets backwards trying to fend off against Ridley's desperate impulse rendered fruitless as he manages to successfully reach in to grab and throw Samus at the wall, proceeding to immediately strike back a second time while having her pinned on the ground by his grasp to finish the job on the spot, unable to escape what's about to take its toll. Until...
Samus? Baby Metroid, what are you gonna do now? What? No!
In front of the Chozo, Olympic, Luminoth, and Bryonian race ascended from planet Elysia, this goddamn breathing video game history book acquires the gift of delivering the unexpected out of thin fucking air by latching straight onto Proteus Ridley's head and learns the first steps of being a Metroid by draining his life energy as its first victim to assist Samus's survival. Fruition made in clear justification that this living spectacle views Samus as a motherly figure ever since birth. I swear on my life when I begin to say that this contorted fight against Ridley gets even better. Phase 3. Rebellion merged into the ethereal conflict's creation. The maxed out levels of chaos has officially reached a breaking point and has evolved into a complete massacre of merciless cause. The raging storm presented by Incarnation has gathered an insurmountable number of wrath, expelling from Proteus Ridley's ever-growing battle music, exponentially rising straight into madness. The gavel of irrevocable judgment has hit the base, announcing that this fight to the death has reached the final destination. Proteus Ridley, furious as ever, now unleashes his very last deadly attacks onto Samus, as he begins to hover above her and rain down 3 consecutive barrages of explosive energy, generating a shockwave upon impact. Accumulates powerful metal-piercing energy from his claw before lashing out in full force, and finally bearing a brand new attack that equates to the same one as before, but with a much different outcome. Left unavoided, Proteus Ridley will suddenly grab onto Samus and proceed to violently smash her repeatedly against the wall before tossing her away, leaving behind ludicrous amounts of health depleted on her life bar that's dangerously close to reaching 0. However, throughout the rest of the duel's entirety, the infant Metroid now begins to assist in battle after Ridley takes a beating of his own, leaving behind an opening that now enables the use of the melee counter that only reveals itself immediately after it finishes the feeding process for an astute full combat action. Hard to see coming, but once landed in quick, perfect succession, Samus goes straight for the kill and climbs onto Ridley's stunned body, swings around his neck and fires vengeful blasts filled with whatever she's got straight down into his mouth. Conclusion. Phase 1. Warm-up, unexpected intervention. Phase 2. Rage and rebellion begins to manifest. Phase 3. Final destination of main character and villain relentlessly demanding the delivery of their own gifted ordeals in total, dominant massacre. That is the final battle in Metroid Samus Returns, a definitive remake of the second game that has literally transcended revival beyond recognition. In all retrospect, I'm honestly beginning to think that after experiencing this blessed, literal, godlike, substantial performance, I genuinely do not believe that Ridley will ever be replaced as my current favorite video game villain. Because he's just so goddamn perfect of being one. I guess that also says the same for everything else about this series. Endless ethereal experiences waiting to be seen and brought into the light. I'll gladly leave it at that. There are countless occurrences where the inner mindset can often deviate from what's not associated in the present. Likewise, the main aspect of reality tends to get overthrown with a dreadful feeling of anxiety taking over our very well-being, which causes the unwanted gestation period of fear to thrive inside our minds and have complete dominion for what it forces us to receive, and ultimately demoralizes our ambitious moralities as impossible merits to acquire in life. An inauguration of birth that everyone wants to schedule the appointment for an abortion because it's nothing related to the gift of life in the slightest degree that's represented. We as human beings tend to get struck by this moral mentality state and fear the inevitable to destroy us when we least expect it. And since the odds of positive morals are constantly being stacked against us, the brain can be our greatest enemy. It's those kinds of thoughts that it begins to process through our own imagination, and fear abolishes every trace of positivity withheld in it that it makes us believe the worst is yet to come, which in reality never arrives to begin with at all. But regardless of how much abundance of strict apprehensive tension impeding our path we walk upon to only be placed as nothing but a meaningless distraction, it's still that insidiously subtle growth of an attack that can be felt in our bodies. One that can and will have an incredibly significant setback to what our eyes are currently witnessing and enable a different perspective that can only be manifested through the lens of anxiousness. A singular visual aspect gifted from the evil side of our mind that only writes out the ways of life to be put to a screeching halt and shouldn't even matter anymore now that fear has been invited to greatly intensify that energy and completely incarcerate ourselves from ever taking another step back to the present tense. It's always there to come back and haunt us whenever it feels the need to do so, making things relatively difficult because we're being held back against its power that's not at all easy to conquer or defeat. The Metroid series as a whole takes this idea and implements it inside the very atmosphere to carry out everything of what it's always been best known for: the feeling of being watched. There have been countless instances of mental scenarios taking effect in certain areas that's more revolved around isolation. There is no way of telling what is going to happen until you eventually find out for yourself. It's a special kind of fear that focuses on the idea that something may be lurking on the other side, expecting you to arrive and get the best off of you in an instant. But in reality, there's nothing. It's only there for the purpose of keeping you on high alert and on edge the entire time, like you're more than ready to open fire on whatever is causing it. That characteristic goes along exceptionally well for deriving the key concept about the Metroid formula, because atmosphere is the primary ingredient to further classify its main background. But there's also the inclusion of mystery added into the mix to keep things more beneficially interesting. Mother Brain is the perfect example of mystery that can ever be brought out in Metroid's entirety. Logically speaking, the outset contributing her origins before she became the former leader of the Space Pirates is what keeps things intact for that different specified form of mystery. In the beginning, Mother Brain was once created by the Chozo for peaceful purposes, which lasted for a time until her secretive, calamitous plot of bringing true order to the universe by resetting everything back to zero, and her betrayal of the Chozo was eventually revealed when the Space Pirates invaded planet Zebes. Mother Brain saw great potential in them, in high hopes for allowing her goal to be brought to fruition, and so acquired the deceitful desire of controlling the race, therefore becoming their leader. Whereas Ridley was put in charge as Space Pirate Commander, and the latter was simply being manipulated by Mother Brain, basically as her servants. And the mystery that's perceivably justified over her intellectual and downright malevolent demeanor correlates to the conclusion that Mother Brain already had a mind of her own from the very start she was created by the Chozo, but has long since eluded the presence of her evil hemisphere by obeying her peaceful authorities until she detected revolutionary potential from the invasion that changed everything into a simple gesture of fingers being crossed for her scheme to take root. Of course, this was never mentioned in the games at all, since her origins are mostly depicted in the manga, yet still follows the general aspect of the actual Metroid timeline. At any rate, Mother Brain is quite the intuitive organic supercomputer that goes right along the spectrum of formidable without question as a Metroid villain that knows how to follow the rules of one. And by formidable, I mean as a singular state of mind that wields all of the necessary functions to control everything from the very area she's stationed in, providing dominion over all that follows her bidding to achieve the indomitable vision she demands as a wish to be granted no matter the cost. With the help of her space pirate comrades and Ridley obeying her commands, along with the Metroid specimens propagated inside the technologically hazardous layer of Turian, built with drastically high defensive security measures, soon to be optimized entirely for bioweapon purposes, should all be taken to note that Mother Brain is most definitely not a run-of-the-mill abnormal human organ with an eyeball. In fact, her basic stationary immobility is tremendously well guarded all the while in every designated room in Turian, that reaching up to her is relatively nothing but a simple accomplishment to acquire in and of itself. In the original NES title of Metroid, the concept of progressing your way to Mother Brain is focused on the general rule of thumb to first eliminate both Kraid and Ridley, the two keys necessary to unlock the gateway and gain clear access to Turian. Upon arrival, hostile Metroid specimens with their respected movement speed will constantly appear in each room to ambush your presence and try to latch onto you. which pretty much counts as an instant game over if they do. Seriously, it's almost entirely impossible to escape from their grasp, I'm not even exaggerating. Requiring the ice beam to temporarily immobilize them and finish them off with 5 rounds of missiles each. All while Rinkas are constantly spawning in seemingly random locations of the area to deviate your progression considerably until you eventually reach the room where Mother Brain resides. Except this is where things start to become more convoluted and really tedious. The evil manipulating supercomputer is heavily guarded with rows of regenerative zebetite barriers that progressively compounds the situation with each one severed, detaining away from your objective significantly from each hazard, ranging from Rinkas and small cannons firing in random directions oversaturating the complex, while trying to dismantle smaller zebetite barriers on a single platform in a disproportionately small area surrounded by lava. Once all zebetite barriers are removed from Mother Brain's life support systems, fire open a missile to break open the stasis tank around her without falling in the lava below, and she will thus be officially exposed to an unavoidable open fire missile barrage cycle until she's extracted from existence, commencing the self-destruct escape sequence, therefore fulfilling your mission. Metroid Zero Mission has the exact same idea, but only with a slight couple of adjustments included. Aside from the vastly improved aesthetic design for the gateway, the blast doors leading to the next room in Torian are now being kept shut until all Metroids in the given area are eliminated, all of which can be seen hiding in the background and emerge out once you approach them, instead of appearing in an instant to strike out in short notice like they did before, and aren't as problematic to break free from capture, yet still redeemable as a threat nonetheless. In addition to a lesser evil green Rinka variant instead of the original red ones that makes ammo and health restoration plentiful, as well as the Rinkas by itself now appear in their own spawn points from parts of the terrain. All in all, this version of terrain has been reduced in threat level quite considerably since the NES, save for one and arguably the most infuriating difference according to the fight with Mother Brain. Same concept as before, but much more challenging, now that she gains the ability to attack you with an accumulated blast of purple energy from her eye, as well as keeping her weak spot consistently and frustratingly secure, since getting pushed off the platform each time when the blast hits you will cause Mother Brain's eye to immediately close and remain shut until you jump back and take the effort of avoiding everything to allow the opportunity of dealing damage to her. Even the escape sequence right after her destruction is more tough. Annoying to a certain degree, but deliberately made so, since Zero Mission as a remake to the original Metroid was deemed very recognizable as one from the prestigious improvements they've included, especially for the whole idea of making Mother Brain more intelligent as a challenging obstacle to destroy that doesn't outright kill you from an unfairly easy mistake to make that makes you fall straight into failure. But those improvements gathered to surpass the 8-bit predecessor is only just a drop from the ocean. Not even the slightest level of justice can ever comprehend to what Super Metroid has to object with unrivaled specifications. This widely popular fan favorite game wields a tremendously powerful arsenal that undoubtedly sustains the very beginning of the franchise, along with it bearing major key differences cropped together for a completely non-binary concept for what source of fear lurks on the other side of that very blast door, waiting to be discovered as something feral. More notably before that, however, is the outset regarding what will soon become history via the plot of Super Metroid. As the timeline follows at its normal chronological order after Metroid 2 reaches the end, Samus takes in the infant Metroid and delivers it to a group of scientists at the Ceres space colony, curious to find out what kinds of powers it possesses. The information they gathered resulted as the key to civilization's revolutionary era for the good of all. Or so we're told, that is. A sense of remarkable achievements gifted by the ever-so-classic line that unfolds its legacy the moment the game begins.
The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace.
For a time, anyway. A catastrophe outcomes the severed line of newly acquired merits as Samus receives a distress signal from Ceres Station's triggered critical alert breakout systems almost immediately after she left. When she arrives back, however, that said catastrophe marks the beginning of something more dreadful than what's already being witnessed. The scientists' bodies lie lifelessly on the ground, caused by none other than Ridley, sent to retrieve what he once failed to attain in the past, and succeeds by stealing the infant Metroid and taking it back to planet Zebes for a much bigger prize lying in wait for the space pirates' future bioweaponized army, thus commencing the eventfully important and serious mission to search what's been lost and to take it back to fulfill the dream for mankind's futuristic, transcending civilization. The surface of the planet itself is built with top-peak rising levels of uncertain awareness emanating through every desolate area that Samus enters inside, like her very presence is not welcomed in the slightest now that the space pirates are more than aware of her arrival. After certain upgrade statistics are met on criteria, on the right side beneath the green space pirate infested corridor ladder segment is a key relevant red blast door that holds the final conclusion to the game. An intriguingly advanced hallway leads toward a small cave with golden statues held together in the background. Each statue represents the 4 main bosses of the game, instead of the normal 2 securing access to Torian. The gems of the eyes shatter, followed by the statue turning gray, therefore indicating that the boss has been defeated. Kraid, Phantoon, Dragon, and Ridley, respectively. Once all 4 are brought to an end, the floor underneath will slowly start to crumble and reveal a hidden underwater elevator passage leading to the lair of Torian. Earlier on that time, traversing through the unmarked hellish depths of Norfair, however, it's already taken to note that since Ridley has what's being relentlessly sought for by Samus, the belief of claiming what undoubtedly lies beyond the door, once heavily obstructed by Ridley, only turns out to be nothing but a shattered acquisition now that the broken capsule is all that remains of the infant Metroid's known whereabouts. And the search once again continues on down into the belly of the beast. And now, things are once again being familiarized for the prime conceptual stipulates associated in Torian's natural classic formula. Rinka's spawn, Metroids impede, freeze and shatter while avoiding capture, door unlocks, par for the course. It may appear at an already perceivable glance that nothing in particular has changed at all, since everything remains the same for Torian's normal standards of progression. But in fact, there are some other unique hidden factors just waiting to reveal Torian's tricks kept up its sleeve. More specifically, consisted as ones that are objectively doubled down classifications written as nothing but immensely unexpected turn of events that's straight up mind-blowing. After all Metroid specimens have been extinguished, you will then enter inside an entirely new area that's not of Torian design. Instead, it's what appears to be a desert-themed environment holding different, stronger species of enemies not normally found on the planet. Mystery invokes the vicinity in far greater levels than usual, now that this remotely out-of-place area is officially part of the Torian complex. But that mystery instantly regresses straight down into a heaping mass of turmoil. When moving onwards inside the ambiguous environment reveals a small isolated room containing a Torizo statue placed in the center wielding a stance of offense, like it's one for Samus to oppose like the others. That is, until it suddenly disintegrates into a pile of dust upon firing. And the turmoil is increasing much more further after realizing in extreme further advisories that danger is within reach. a source of emanating danger that exponentially increases in sheer powerful levels of apprehension after multiple other creatures gathered in the next room that have suffered the exact same fate as the Torizo statue. The needle has hit the red zone. Danger is critically imminent. That's also not to mention the suspenseful boss approaching music encasing the atmosphere in greater levels for clear emphasis on the dreadful situation that's being uncovered, which from that point forward hits a tremendous break point when the screen scrolling interval suddenly comes to a halt, followed by a two-legged enemy creature subspecies slowly jumps out from the left side of the area until that minor unthreatening enemy encounter is demolished in a goddamn instant when a gigantic abnormal-sized Metroid strikes out faster than a simple bodily motion and immediately follows its instincts by latching on to the enemy and has every single living trace of life energy extracted out of its body and joins the fallen as an empty husk. But that outcome of dismay grows more worse as the Metroid now has its sights aiming directly toward you. An irrevocable withdrawal of pursuing actions that can only be watched as Samus's entire stock of energy reserves is now being absorbed in rapid acceleration, weakening her mobility. All attempts for retaliation are fruitlessly wasted. What comes next ends it as nothing but a misconception after Samus's health stops with 1 HP remaining. At this very moment, right before when the inevitable was about to take its toll, after every option for escape became disabled, the final result comes in as multiple elements built together for this grand scene of a remarkable discovery manifested in both perspectives for Samus, barely hanging on, and the Metroid realizing its mistake for almost killing her and runs off apologetically in a regrettable fashion, justifying the whole scenario as one that presumably led to an instant unavoidable demise, but is instead forced to disobey the cataclysmic withdrawal and restores function between the bond that was bestowed from the beginning of an unbreakable connection. An inspirationally and objectively historical moment of the ages carries out in fascinating conclusion that this very abnormal gigantic Metroid that is being witnessed above Samus's head, seen as a near lifeless victim, is the exact same one she has been searching high and low for. And furthermore, in an amazing twist to always remember as the days go by, the Metroid, no longer an infant, still remembers her as its mother. It is nothing short but a miracle that something like this has been turned for the better, and I can guarantee that a lot of players back in the day were brought with a state of utter amazement when the moment of realization struck down, inches close, before death was about to execute the final moments of Samus's life. But this miraculous discovery of Super Metroid is only the goddamn beginning for what I stated objectively before on the last entry in regards to making history in video games. After when the grown-up Metroid runs off in lament, you descend down further onwards toward where the organic, manipulative, and traitorous supercomputer lies secluded beyond the glass structure of her stasis tank, patiently awaiting your grand arrival like the good old days. Although things start off relatively normal and basic standards for Turian's formula, save for the chamber requiring a couple extra missiles to shatter off an exposure for Mother Brain's second downfall. Once that's done, the mechanical structures securing Mother Brain in place will crumble off from her life support systems and be left to suffocate from lack of energy sustenance. At least, that's what everyone, and myself included, initially thought would happen at first. Because never in our entire lives would we ever possibly begin to imagine that instead, all hell would break loose. I don't think even an exorcist would be enough to dispel what sort of hell-bent, contorted, grotesque abomination has emerged from its unwanted revival. Especially coming from one that has recently undergone increased bioweaponizing procedures for the purpose of relearning their previous mistake to never be made the same way as before, and clearly seen that it was further done so by allowing newly acquired limb enhancements to hedge its bet at maximum levels and desperate notions. In other words, Mother Brain is no longer messing around. Her desire for wanting total dominion over the universe has escalated so drastically since her first cause of termination that her commitment is still held true by the presence of her transcended revitalization as one to further demonstrate that she means business. And throughout the entire time during this horrifyingly unexpected encounter between a nightmare-inducing form of Mother Brain that's now a straight-up demon, the whole idea of fear waiting to strike down whenever you least expect it to happen, combined with the aspects of unwariness and mystery, building up the setting for deriving those powerful elements of fear, expressing what sort of disaster is lurking in the shadows to get the best off of you in an instant. A belief that's pierced into your mind by brute mental force has now become a reality from which there is no way out from its grasp. You are trapped from within the hands of evil, causing immense anxiety to be produced exponentially, forcing you to expect that this will officially mark the end of your life. But instead of anything like this happening outside the world of screen technology, it is actually being manifested in the game that's being played. And the protagonist that you are playing as is witnessing the very source of all fear being contained inside the very small room where you remain, trapped, nowhere to run, held back from the behemoth that has its eyes locked onto your sights, seeking to destroy you with no means of avoiding its mortal strike. A living nightmare of monstrous size, expelling purple haze from the lungs of true evil thirsting for mutilation, representing the physical manifestation of fear itself, thriving within the music that plays alarmingly, that it sounds like the odds of victory are never in your favor. What's happening is starting to begin. The extreme amounts of apprehension, combined with turbulent noises heard in crucial factors written in nothing but dread, overflowing the atmosphere, in addition to the spine-chilling screeches of Mother Brain molded together into one big mass of fear, makes this scene so goddamn intense and insidiously heart-pounding. Even more so that it was deliberately designed in 16-bit quality, just for the purpose of causing the player to feel afraid and defenseless. The concept of this fight against Mother Brain's demonic form for fear implementation is jarring enough on its own as a Metroid experience. However, additionally, it is also that kind of special experience in video games that looks and feels immersive. And I could even go as far by reiterating my objective statement, increasingly more factual, that it is, without question, a beyond ethereal work of mastery that no other video game can ever possibly have the chance of surpassing what is about to be justified. Mother Brain's soul-driven commitment of attaining her goal has maintained a direct superior life form in unreal qualities that her arsenal consists of an onslaught of attacks to prepare for the worst. Multiple blue rings that expands in diameter and follows your movement, a small bouncing bomb that creates a widespread shockwave once it goes off, linear space pirate projectile firing directly above, and an auto-seeking barrage of segmented explosions that launches out at ridiculous speeds. Since it's an obvious clarification to perceive over Mother Brain recently hedging her bet to ensure the desire for the probability of failure to be 100% unlikely on her part, her entire body is left completely invulnerable to all forms of attacks she receives. Even if you focus on the standard efforts of aiming for her head, it does absolutely nothing to reveal a sign of making progress. In fact, every charge shot, missile, and super missile are now resistant and effectively useless. Yet despite her now rapid-fire missile barrage invulnerability state making it seem pointless to oppose her, it still remains as the only option you have that's meant for offensive maneuver stipulates in an attempt for a so-called do something gesture. But those notions for desperate retaliation only merges into a much different scenario to what's classified as one that no one in their entire life could ever bear the will of expecting to happen right before them. After certain conditions are met through multiplied useless missile inputs fired repeatedly at the head, Mother Brain's actions for fighting gradually diminishes into a halt in a confusing turn that makes it believe that progress is being made for the player. However, little did they expect that feeling of progression was not specifically intended to be for them. Instead, the whole idea of Mother Brain slowing down was made for her to draw in unreal amounts of energy stored inside her head, and uses all of it at once in the blink of an eye to unleash the most infamous upon infamous, monumentally devastating, unavoidable laser of death. The jaw-dropping effects from this attack are so unbelievably powerful that it is more than enough to not only literally vaporize your ammunition reserve straight down to zero and deal an insane amount of damage to make Phil Swift gush over in complete satisfaction, but it is also that compoundingly strong in such immensely sharpened measures to permeate the mind in disbelief as Samus Aran, once known as a fearless, powerful bounty hunter in the galaxy, is now seen in a permanent sprite animation, writhing in pain and brought down to her knees after receiving the blast from Mother Brain's hyper beam. But in addition, more beyond that, this attack from Mother Brain is also that tremendously powerful enough to ultimately create the very fucking pinnacle for the whole idea of making the player feel useless, weak, pathetic, demoralized as they reach in for the controller and notice the unthinkable outcome received from the hyper beam when the act of controlling their character has now become disabled. In other words, you are no longer in control. It has come to this moment of you being forced to witness the nightmarish evolved bioform of Mother Brain proceeding to unleash more of the attack onto their character, or in this case, themselves, seen completely defenseless, vulnerable, hopeless, standing no chance against the unbelievable situation seen with their very own eyes, having no other options left but to submit. believing that this is, indeed, the end. Mother Brain's continuous outburst from her secret weapon rages on, in atomic, immersifying trauma sent to Samus Aran, as her health has reached the critical danger zone, approaching closer and mocks her up front by slowly diminishing her remaining energy down to half of an energy tank left over. Still unable to stand from the insufferable affliction she's received in repeated agonizing nuclear warfare that's ever so close to intrude inside her body and demolish her ambition to nothing, readying the final excruciating blast of energy to mercilessly destroy her on the spot. Just when all hope is about to be lost, out of fucking nowhere, the now grown-up Metroid, still holding its powerful will as Samus's child, arrives in a goddamn instant once more, just in time before the last draw from the attack was about to connect, and violently latches onto Mother Brain's head, absorbing the attack and extracts her life essence into a colorless husk, and floats towards Samus to deploy its victim's life energy to replenish hers, witnessing in disbelief that this very creature grew up to become a miracle like no other video game could ever manage to compete with so much powerful and conflictingly unfathomable effects. Perceiving the act for this Metroid, earning every right to begin pasting its own legacy on a slab made of diamond as a living miracle for the player. The beginning of history being purposely written in all of gaming, as its process for healing Samus still remains in effect. Mother Brain suddenly resurrects back from the dead, rejuvenated with full energy, uncontrolled by her furious actions, aiming at the Metroid, defending Samus like a shield, taking in every blow, reducing in color, and finally loosens its grip to go in for a second attack in an effort to protect its mother no matter the cost, even if it means its own life. And just like that, history has been made. Since the dawn of the beginning for a new era was brought out for the universe. A living spectacle like no other. A parasitic creature classified as one to be extremely dangerous and assigned for the expense of mass genocide. Unthreatening gestures only seen as a welcoming gift for its very first sight. It called its mother, following around Samus like a pet, following the event of civilization's future utilized by its monumental energy-producing qualities, ravaged as the enemy steals the key to the universe's revolution for the good of all, and taken in for the cause of evil as a bioweapon. Sought to search high and low across every dark and imposing landscape across planet Zebes. A commitment so strong and built with unreal amounts of ambition leads up to the moment of finding it again, grown more larger, still able to recognize the character after all this time since it was kidnapped, and arrives back once again, for the last time, by saving Samus Aran's life. Dreadfully hanging close by a thread, about to fall in an immediate demise, revitalizes her powers back to normal condition, all while shielding her for protection against Mother Brain's furious, sudden revival, and allegedly rebels against her attacks, slowly turning darker in color, until the final moment reaches into a closure as the most beyond greatest sacrifice ever seen in the history of gaming. A sacrifice so unbelievably mind-blowing that after all this time, with every ounce of sweat and blood, overflowed with ambition, seeking the infant Metroid, led to waste. The key, the answer, the very image needed to unlock the future for the good of all civilization, gone, destroyed, deceased, history falling from above your head. The extinction of Metroids occurs right before you, the last of its kind, once known to carry out a brand new future, now known as a miracle, letting out a heart-piercing shriek and explodes into pieces. And at that moment, all traces of alarming fear are extinguished and is thus replaced by the outskirts of Crateria, normally heard near Samus's gunship, and is now heard in the form of glory, reawakening into a fanfare of triumph and victory, as the Metroid's demise causes its remains to be absorbed by Samus and acquires the very source of energy it has extracted from Mother Brain, the secret weapon that was devastatingly close to killing you. The Hyper Beam is now fully utilized into your arm cannon and fired back against her. Sweet, sweet revenge officially commences Mother Brain's ultimate termination. The very source of fear, now wearing the expression of impossible, has now lost its power and is set to be conquered and dispelled from existence forever. Triggering the planetary escape sequence just like always, and Super Metroid ends at the cost of everything, with only your life surviving the catastrophe and living on to tell the tale like no other. I am at a loss for words of how incredulous this fight, along with Super Metroid in general, being so perfect with everything that the world has ever known. I can't even begin to express how appalled I am for knowing the whole idea of this entire fearfully conflicting and tremendously immersive scenario was actually made for a fucking video game on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System during the 1980s. How is something like this even possible? How could a game with little to no physical representation of dialogue being noticed in its entirety actually have the goddamn liability of creating such an insurmountable impact that was designed for the final boss? And yet, I'm asking like I don't already know. Super Metroid is just the game to have every right of defining actions speaking louder than words. And oh my fucking Arceus and Shang-Tian almighty, Mother Brain is packed with it! A fight that starts in shock and horror all throughout, immersifying the experience by the game calling you worthless and unable to achieve anything, but only left to accept your fate, results in a miracle sent to save your life from the evil clutches of fear, dangerously close to get the best off of you in an instant, and bestows the weapon needed to eliminate the source for good. Mother Brain is a boss fight in Metroid that continuously spreads throughout and beyond in each passing day to reach into the minds of players to experience in all of its former glory in excellent measures of what it was made to do. It emerges in fear and grows in unrelenting suspense like no other, transmuting into demoralizing failure that was forced to be accepted. But when all seemed lost, the Metroid comes in to save your life by sacrificing its own, and allows you to obliterate the infernal creature and escape with your life. A fight that ends in equality. This Metroid was the key to attainment, the cause for Mother Brain to take over the universe by resetting everything to make things however she desired with the power of the Metroid, and the cause for Samus for allowing civilization to evolve by harnessing the powers of the Metroid for good. Both commitments brought to an end. Neither will see the light of day. but it was done for the cause of something, or rather, someone being much more important than anything else that will change the future. You, the player, as intergalactic bounty hunter, Samus Aran. Absolutely fucking phenomenal. And yet, we've reached the top 3.